I'm Olivia Hartman, 34, freelance editor, and until recently, broke enough that even the thrift store felt like a splurge. The invitation arrived in a pale blue envelope, heavy with faux elegance. Embossed gold lettering spelled out, "The Hartman Family Reunion, celebrating 20 years of togetherness." A catered weekend at a rented estate in upstate New York. Dress code, cocktail casual, RSVP required. I stared at the card, heart thudding. It had been 5 years since I last saw most of my family. I had reasons, financial struggles, heartbreak, the kind of life messiness people like my sister Madison avoided like bad lighting. But the real reason? I was tired of being the family disappointment. Still, something about this invite felt different. Maybe it was the formal tone, or the sense that this would be the reunion to remember. I almost tossed it in the trash, until I flipped the card and read, "There will be a family legacy presentation on Saturday night. All members encouraged to attend." That word, legacy, hit me like a punch. Because for most of my life, I didn't have one. Before we continue, I want to know, have you ever skipped a family event because you just couldn't face the judgment? Drop a comment below. And if you've ever had to prove your worth to people who dismissed you, hit that like button. Trust me, you're not alone. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The bookworm. The girl with big ideas and secondhand shoes. My parents, Janet and William Hartman, were proud in a quiet, restrained way. Of Madison. Always Madison. She was the star, head cheerleader, business school prodigy. Now a branding consultant with a sleek condo and a fiancé who manages hedge funds. Meanwhile, I took out student loans to study literature. I freelanced while living in shared apartments and ate a lot of rice and frozen peas. They didn't understand that path, especially not after the divorce. 3 years ago, I married Aaron. It was passionate, poetic, and a disaster. He was a writer, too. We dreamed of creative freedom but lived paycheck to paycheck until the checks stopped coming. He left a note and a stack of unpaid bills. No explanation. No goodbye. Just, I can't do this anymore. That was rock bottom. For the next year, I worked nights at a cafe while editing manuscripts by day. I barely spoke to my family. Madison sent the occasional text. "Hope you're okay." Mom forwarded job links. Dad asked if I'd thought about real work, but I knew the subtext. You failed. Again. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that something had shifted in the last 18 months. Quietly. Behind the scenes. But I'll get to that. The reunion weekend arrived faster than expected. I didn't RSVP, I didn't confirm. I just showed up. The estate was sprawling, ivy-covered walls, grand staircases, white tents strung with fairy lights. Everyone was there. The whole extended Hartman clan. Uncles, aunts, second cousins, all dressed like walking Pinterest boards. I wore a navy blue dress I'd found in a Brooklyn thrift store for $8. It had a small tear at the hem, which I'd stitched by hand. My shoes were clean but scuffed. My hair, usually tucked in a bun for convenience, was styled in soft curls that morning. I even wore lipstick, a rare move. As I walked toward the entrance, I spotted Madison near the mimosa bar, surrounded by her usual entourage. She caught sight of me and raised an eyebrow. "Well, well," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby. "Still broke, huh?" Her eyes scanned me like a price tag. Or is thrift chic a thing again? Laughter. Software cutting. I smiled politely, heart hammering. "Nice to see you too, Madison." She blinked as if surprised I responded at all. Before she could reply, Uncle Rob swept in and handed her a drink. I walked past them and into the ballroom, determined to stay invisible. Then I saw it. The screen. Floor to ceiling, centered above the fireplace. A note on the evening program read, 7 p.m. The Hartman Legacy, Family Impact Reel. Something inside me twisted. They were going to play their highlight reels, Madison's TEDx talk, Cousin Ella's nonprofit award. Probably footage of Grandpa cutting the ribbon at the first Hartman Foundation school in Kenya. No one would expect to see me on that screen. But I knew what was coming. And when that reel started playing, everything, every whisper, every sneer, every judgment was about to be swallowed by the truth. They had no idea what I'd done. Not yet. By 6:45 p.m., the ballroom buzzed with forced laughter and the sound of champagne flutes clinking. The family reunion was in full swing, and I had become exactly what they expected. Background noise. My mother waved me over once, briefly. "Olivia, sweetie, glad you made it." Then she turned back to her conversation about cruise packages with Aunt Doreen. My dad gave me a one-armed hug and asked, "Still doing that proofreading thing?" I nodded. "Editing," I corrected softly, but he was already checking his watch. I'd never felt more invisible. Dinner was a buffet of overpriced appetizers with French names and no seasoning. Madison made a show of announcing her engagement to Preston, flashing a ring so large it could have signaled aircraft. Everyone applauded. Cameras flashed. Her moment. Again. By the time the MC tapped the mic to announce the Hartman Legacy presentation, I was practically forgotten. Until the lights dimmed. Please turn your attention to the screen as we celebrate the accomplishments of the Hartman family. 20 years of legacy, leadership, and love. The first slide was exactly what I expected. Grandpa cutting a red ribbon, Aunt Carla shaking hands with the senator, Madison grinning at a podium. I sipped my water and waited. Then the screen went black, and a new video began. It opened with soft piano music and a black screen with white text. Sometimes legacies are built quietly, until they speak for themselves. Madison's smile faltered. Mom looked confused. I sat still. The video began to play clips from a digital platform. One few of them would recognize. Book verse. A narrator's voice came through. Professional, calm, proud. Book verse. The world's fastest-growing editorial community, with over 40,000 writers, 8 million monthly readers, and one mission, to elevate voices that matter. Founded in 2021 by Olivia Hartman. Madison's head snapped toward me. Bookverse started in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn with a single laptop and a woman who believed that words could build bridges. My face appeared on the screen. An old photo. Candid, me at my tiny kitchen table, surrounded by sticky notes and a cold cup of tea. Gasps rippled across the room. I didn't move. In just 18 months, Bookverse partnered with 120 publishing houses, hosted over 300 virtual author events, and launched writing scholarships in underrepresented communities. Screenshots of headlines flashed by. Brooklyn woman disrupts traditional publishing. Forbes 30 under 35. Olivia Hartman changes the game. Bookverse raises $12 million in funding. I didn't blink. I couldn't. But my hands trembled slightly in my lap. The narrator continued. This is the legacy of someone they once called just a bookworm. The woman who turned heartbreak into purpose, rejection into reach. The girl they ignored at the dinner table, now building one where everyone has a seat. The screen faded to black again. Then my face returned. A video clip. I remembered recording it 6 months ago at the request of my communications director. I'd thought it was for internal use only. I used to think success meant approval, validation, that if I could just become something impressive, they'd finally see me. But I've learned, you don't need to be seen to be powerful. You just need to know your own worth. That's where everything begins. The screen faded once more. Then a single sentence appeared. Legacy isn't what they remember you for. It's what you build while they're not looking. Silence. Then the lights came back on. The room was frozen. Forks midair, jaws half open. My mother looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. My father blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what just happened. Madison stared at me like I'd shapeshifted. For the first time in my life, I had taken up space in a room full of people who once looked right through me. Before I continue, tell me in the comments, Have you ever shocked people who underestimated you? Ever walked into a room and made them regret counting you out? This story's not over, because the real drama hadn't even started yet. Preston, Madison's fiancé, leaned in toward her and whispered something. She looked at him, then looked at me, then stood up. Nobody told me she was that Olivia Hartman, she snapped. The room turned to her. She tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. This whole time you've been, secretly successful? Why not say anything, Liv? I stood up slowly, calm, centered, because I wanted to see who treated me like a person before they saw me as a headline. And then I walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned silence, past the glittering lights, and out into the cool evening air. They weren't done talking, but neither was I. The sound of the ballroom doors clicking shut behind me was sharper than I expected, like the final note in a symphony I never asked to perform. Outside, the air was cool, but I was burning. My hands trembled, not from shame or fear, but adrenaline. I hadn't planned for that video to play. It was my assistant, Marcus, who had uploaded it at the request of the event planner. Apparently, she'd reached out for any family legacy materials from all branches. He'd assumed I'd approved it. I hadn't. But in hindsight, maybe it was time. As I leaned against the stone wall of the patio, trying to slow my breathing, the door creaked open. Footsteps. I didn't turn around. Olivia, Madison's voice called out, clipped and sharp like a stiletto's on marble. I turned slowly. She stood framed in the doorway, her flawless curls still perfectly pinned, but her expression was tight. Tense. Wounded? Maybe. You blindsided us, she said, arms crossed. Did I? I replied, my voice calm. Or were you just too busy looking past me to notice? She blinked. You've built a whole company, a movement apparently, and you didn't tell anyone. I wasn't hiding it. I just wasn't performing it. Madison laughed, one of those hollow, incredulous laughs that never reaches the eyes. No, you waited. You waited for your moment. You could have told me. Would it have mattered? I asked, stepping toward her. Would you have listened without comparing? Without reminding me how you did it faster, better, louder? She hesitated. I wanted to be proud of you, she said, quieter now. But tonight made me feel like the fool. I took a breath. For years, that's exactly how I felt. At every family gathering, every dinner table. Every time Mom asked how your consulting was going and skipped right over me. Her face softened, almost imperceptibly. You're right, she said, surprising me. You're absolutely right. That stunned me into silence. I've made this whole family about appearances, she added, about status and who's got the flashiest title or the biggest ring. But tonight you had something none of us did. Authenticity? I offered. She nodded, then gave a sad smile. And maybe actual meaning. Before I could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Preston. Olivia, he said. Could we talk for a minute? Madison's eyes darted to him, wary. Alone. I glanced at her. She nodded and stepped aside, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Preston approached, hands in his pockets. I had no idea you were that Olivia Hartman, he began. I use book verse. I raised a brow. You're a writer? Finance blog, he said sheepishly. But still, I've followed your work for over a year. The privacy features, the community moderation, the storytelling focus, it's genius. I said nothing. What you did tonight, he continued, it changed the tone of this whole event. For once, it wasn't about who's wearing what or who's engaged to whom. It was about something real. Why are you telling me this? I asked, suspicious. Because, he said slowly, Madison isn't who I thought she was. Ah, there it was. She's... He hesitated. A good person, but her world is curated. Everything has to be filtered and glossy. But I watched you walk in tonight wearing a thrift store dress and still command the entire room. That's rare. I felt an old instinct rise, the urge to apologize for making things uncomfortable, but I buried it. I'm not here to be compared, I said. I know, he replied quickly. And I'm not trying to flirt. I just needed to say it. He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone again under the stars. Inside, I could hear music starting up again. The party was resuming, but the atmosphere had shifted, and I could feel it even from here. Before I go on, have you ever had a moment where everything flipped? Where the people who judged you suddenly had to reckon with who you really are? Share it in the comments. Because those moments, they stay with you. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. You're trending. I blinked. What? Attached was a link to a video someone had posted of the Hartman legacy clip. It had already reached 180,000 views in 2 hours. Comments were pouring in. This woman's story gave me chills. Proof you don't need to scream to be powerful. Who else Googled Olivia Hartman and ended up inspired? And then the one that made me stop cold. I wish my family saw me like this. Thank you, Olivia. I stared at the screen, the comments a blur. I hadn't just been seen. I had been felt. I slipped the phone back into my purse, and this time, when I walked back toward the ballroom, it wasn't with the weight of proving anything. It was with the quiet power of someone who finally knew what she was worth. And that changed everything. I walked back into the ballroom like I had nothing to prove. Because for the first time in years, I truly didn't. The laughter, once sharp and guarded, was now laced with hesitation. The same people who had barely acknowledged me during appetizers were suddenly all smiles and curiosity. I'd seen it before. This type of shift. The same people who dismiss you when you're struggling are the first to rewrite your story when success makes you visible. Aunt Doreen was the first to pounce. Olivia, darling, she crooned, grabbing my hands. Why didn't you tell us about your little company? We would have loved to support you. Little company? It's not that little anymore, I said with a tight smile. But thank you. Oh, I just adore female entrepreneurs, she gushed. So empowering. Her tone made me feel like I'd won a baking contest, not built a digital empire. Across the room, Mom stood stiffly by the dessert table, her eyes tracking me like a hawk. She hadn't said a word since the video. I approached her cautiously. Hi, Mom. She cleared her throat. That video? It was impressive. Thank you. Long pause. You could have told us, she added, her voice brittle. I had no idea. I know. That was kind of the point. She flinched, then softened. Is this what you've been doing all this time? The long hours, the missed birthdays? I nodded. Why didn't you ever just ask for help? I let that hang in the air for a second. Because whenever I struggled, you said things like, you chose that path, or maybe it's time to get serious. You didn't see me, Mom. You saw a mistake you couldn't fix. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I wasn't asking for help, I continued. I was asking for support. There's a difference. She stared at the floor, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. I'm sorry, she whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. From the stage, Uncle Rob announced that the dance floor was open. People began trickling toward the center of the room. Laughter returned. Lighter this time, though tinged with curiosity and discomfort. And then, of course, Madison took the mic. Before the next song, I just want to say how proud we all are of Olivia. What an unexpected success story. There it was, the backhanded compliment. Some people clapped politely. Others looked at her, then at me, unsure of what to do. Madison smiled wide, her eyes gleaming. So rare to see passion and profit align, isn't it? I walked slowly up to her and took the mic gently from her hand. She didn't fight it, but her smile faded slightly. Thanks, Madison, I said, turning to the crowd. It's true. Sometimes success is unexpected, especially by those closest to us. A few heads turned, a few eyebrows lifted. But let me say this clearly. My story isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving myself right. I looked directly at Madison and realizing that the only validation worth chasing is your own. Then I set the mic down and stepped off the stage, heart pounding but steady. People applauded, not the loud kind that comes from politeness, but the scattered, slow kind that comes from people who are thinking. That's when I saw her, Grandma Ruth. She'd stayed seated in the far corner the whole night, mostly quiet, sipping tea and observing. Her eyes met mine and she gave me the faintest nod. When I reached her, she patted the seat beside her. "You always were the sharp one," she said. "Quiet, but sharp." I smiled. "You knew?" "I didn't need headlines to know your worth, sweetheart. But it's nice to see the rest of them catching up." I blinked back sudden tears. Of all the people I wanted to make proud, she had never once made me feel small. "Madison's always been the peacock," Grandma added. You're the hawk. People don't see you coming until it's too late." That made me laugh. She leaned closer. "But don't let them make you bitter, Liv. Don't confuse silence with defeat, or applause with love." That hit me harder than anything else tonight. Before I continue, have you ever had someone finally see you when it mattered most? Drop it in the comments. Or tag someone who did that for you, because sometimes one person noticing you can change everything. The band started up again. Couples swayed on the floor. For a moment, it looked like any other party. But under the surface, everything had changed. Because now they were wondering what else I'd been building in silence. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with the kind of emotional hangover no amount of sleep could cure. My phone was buzzing again. Notifications, articles, DMs. Overnight, the video had crossed 1 million views. 1 million! Marcus texted me. Bookverse servers handled the spike. Also, publishers are calling. Lots of them. I rubbed my eyes and opened Instagram. Someone had posted a clip of my line from the mic last night. "The only validation worth chasing is your own." It had already been reshared by several popular empowerment accounts. My follower count had doubled. So had the inquiries. But what stood out the most were the messages from strangers. I watched this with tears in my eyes. I needed to hear that. I've been hiding my startup from my family for fear of being judged. Not anymore. You made me feel like I wasn't alone. And then, tucked between all the glowing responses, was a single DM that stopped me cold. From Aaron W. Message: "Congratulations. I always knew you'd find your voice. I'm sorry I didn't stick around long enough to hear it. Aaron, my ex-husband." I stared at his message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it. Another part, deeper, older, wanted to respond. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned off my phone and pulled open the curtains. The morning light spilled across the carpet, golden and soft, and for the first time in years, I felt steady. Later that afternoon, as I checked out of the hotel, I passed the lounge where several family members were gathered. Madison spotted me first. "Liv," she called out, getting up from the couch. "Can we talk?" She didn't look smug this time. She looked tired. We walked outside to the garden where yesterday's cocktail tables still stood, empty and stained with glass rings. She clasped her hands together, uncharacteristically nervous. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Not just for the comments or the mic thing, for a lot." I waited. For years, I let the spotlight turn me into someone I don't like. And I pushed you out of it without even realizing how hard you were trying to earn a seat at the table. "I wasn't trying to earn it," I corrected. "I was trying to stop needing it." She nodded. "That's even worse, because I made you feel like it wasn't even yours to begin with." Silence hung between us like fog. Then she added, "I'm not happy, Olivia." "Not really. Preston and I—" She stopped. "It's not what it looks like." I raised an eyebrow. "That's surprising." She half laughed, then turned serious again. You're the first one in the family to break the pattern, to build something that doesn't revolve around appearances. That took guts. I looked at her for a long moment. My sister. My rival. My mirror. You don't have to live in the version of you they built, I said quietly. You're allowed to start over. Her eyes welled up. Do you think it's too late? No, I said, meaning it. But you have to want the truth more than the image. She wiped her eyes and gave me a smile so unguarded it almost broke me. I'd like to know you better, she said. Not compete, just know you. That would be nice, I replied, feeling something shift. Something old, bitter, loosening its grip. Before we left the garden, she reached into her purse and handed me something. What's this? An RSVP card, she said, for my next event. A women's entrepreneur panel. Real women. Real stories. I want you to be the keynote. I stared at it. You sure they want someone who shops thrift and doesn't sugarcoat their past? She grinned. That's exactly who they want. As I drove away from the estate, past the rolling hills and ivy-covered walls, I thought about how this weekend had started, with pity, judgment, and quiet humiliation. But I was leaving with something else. Not vindication, not revenge, but recognition. And with it, a reminder I want you to carry with you. You do not need their permission to be powerful. You do not need to be flashy to be valid. And you do not need to be invited to build something unforgettable. Sometimes the table doesn't need to be flipped. Sometimes you build your own. And when you do, they'll hear the echo. 2 weeks after the reunion, life didn't dramatically change. There was no parade, no sudden validation from all corners of the world. But something inside me had shifted, and that, more than anything, was the win. I was back in Brooklyn, seated at my favorite coffee shop. Same table by the window, same chipped mug, same almond croissant. But for the first time, I wasn't writing to escape. I was writing because I could breathe. My inbox still buzzed with media inquiries and publisher pitches, but I wasn't chasing any of it. I'd done enough chasing in my life. Now things were coming to me. Respect, opportunities, recognition. All the things I used to beg for in rooms that barely noticed I was there. And then, on a Wednesday morning, my doorbell rang. Madison. She held a reusable shopping bag filled with lemons and fresh rosemary and a single box of dry pasta. I brought dinner, she said. I stared at her. You cook? She laughed. Not well, but I'm trying. We ended up making lemon garlic pasta together in my tiny kitchen. She cried twice, once when she couldn't figure out how to zest the lemon, and once when she accidentally spilled olive oil on her blouse. But it wasn't dramatic. It was real, human, unfiltered. Over dinner, she told me she and Preston had broken off the engagement. He said he didn't sign up for a woman who was still figuring herself out. Sounds like he didn't understand what growth looks like, I said. He understood perfectly. He just didn't want to wait for it. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. And somewhere between the awkward clinks of mismatched forks and laughter over how overcooked the pasta was, we started stitching something back together. Not as competitors, not even as siblings trying to outdo each other. Just two women who were finally learning how to be honest. Before she left that night, she paused at the door. You know, she said, you looked powerful that night at the reunion. Not because of the company, not because of the video, but because you didn't flinch when they laughed. I blinked. I flinched on the inside, I admitted. She nodded. Still, you stood there anyway, and I saw it, that quiet strength. Then she hugged me. A long, real hug. The kind we hadn't shared since we were kids in matching holiday pajamas. A few days later, I visited my parents. It wasn't a dramatic showdown, or a perfectly healed moment. It was awkward, as those things often are. Mom apologized again, in her own way. Through overfeeding me, straightening my collar and asking too many questions about how to invest in tech stocks. Dad didn't say much, but when I was leaving, he walked me to the car and said, "I read that article about Bookverse. You built something real, kid." Then, after a beat, "Wish I'd told you sooner I was proud." I didn't cry until I got back to my apartment, because it wasn't about their words. It was about finally not needing them. Before I close this story, I want to share something with you. The person listening, watching, reading. When they underestimate you. When they talk over you at dinner. When they call your dreams unrealistic or laugh at your outfit, or forget your name when listing the successful cousins. You have a choice. You can shrink. Or you can keep building quietly. Because one day, your truth will be too loud to ignore. And when that day comes, you don't have to gloat. You don't have to say a word. Just show up. In your thrift store dress. With your real laugh. And your quiet, undeniable power. Because you are already enough. You've been enough this whole time. They just took a little too long to see it. I'm Lisa Bennett, 31 years old, communications consultant, Manhattan-based, independent, and, according to my mother, still tragically alone. Today, I stood in front of the mirror in my Brooklyn apartment, smoothing out the soft emerald green satin of my dress. It hugged my body in all the right places. Classy, elegant, confident, or at least I hoped I looked that way. Inside, my nerves were crawling. My cousin Amanda's wedding was being held at the Astoria Garden Club, one of those fairy tale venues with chandeliers and real orchids flown in from somewhere tropical. My whole extended family would be there. And I would be walking in solo. I had debated not going. Really. The invitation had arrived 2 months ago, addressed formally, Lisa Bennett plus guest, like a gentle slap in the face. As if the universe wanted to remind me I'd just ended a 6-year relationship that should have ended at year 2. But I wasn't going to let them see me broken. The moment I walked in, conversations dipped. Aunt Margie, holding a mimosa with too much pulp, elbowed Uncle Ray. She came alone. I heard her say, not even bothering to whisper. Poor Lisa, such a shame. 31 and not even dating? I didn't flinch. I've trained myself not to. But inside, that old sting returned. From across the room, I caught Mom's sigh before I even saw her. She was standing with her signature glass of white wine and that soft look of pity she always wore like pearls. She'll never find someone, she said to no one and everyone. She works too much. Men don't like women like that. I smiled politely, nodded at a few people, and made my way to the bar. The bartender didn't even ask. Just handed me a Prosecco like he'd seen it a dozen times. The single woman's survival glass. You know that moment when your whole life plays in your head and you ask yourself, how did I end up here? That was me, perched on the edge of a cream velvet bar stool, nursing overpriced bubbles while watching Amanda, the cousin whose biggest accomplishment was marrying rich, bask in the glow of everyone's approval. Aunt Susan passed behind me and patted my shoulder. Still no +1? Well, you know, Lisa, some people just aren't meant to find love. But you've always had your career. I turned away, gripping the stem of my glass so tightly it might have snapped. I didn't always feel this way. There was a time I believed in partnership, in a future, in love. But my ex, Daniel, taught me how naive I'd been. 6 years of my life invested. 6. I stood by him through job loss, depression, career changes, and a whole year when he couldn't decide what he wanted. And then, when I finally landed a dream client and started getting noticed professionally, he couldn't handle it. You're too much now, he said. Too independent. I miss when you needed me. Translation: I don't like watching you become more than I am. He left a month later, for someone who got him better. And now, here I was, at a family wedding, surrounded by judgmental glances, forced smiles, and passive-aggressive pity. The ceremony was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Most of the guests were already seated. I hadn't dared go inside yet. That's when Kimberly, my younger sister, approached. Perfect Kimberly. The one who married at 24, had 2 kids by 28, and lived in a house with a white fence in Connecticut like it was an HGTV ad. "Hey, Lisa," she said, offering a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. "Mom's been worried sick you wouldn't show. You know how she gets." "Here I am," I replied, sipping my Prosecco. "Alone, though?" Her eyes scanned the room dramatically. "No, date?" I raised an eyebrow. "No, just me." Kimberly's lips curled into a smirk. "Well, it's brave. Some women would have stayed home." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. That's what years of conditioning does. You master the art of silent endurance. "See you inside?" she chirped, turning on her nude heels. And then the doors to the venue flew open. Heads turned, and a man walked in like he owned every molecule of air in the room. Tailored charcoal suit, clean lines, presence like thunder wrapped in silk. He was tall, confident, and magnetic. The kind of man who didn't just enter a room. He rewrote its atmosphere. My heart stuttered. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is that? Is that? He looks like..." Then he walked straight toward me. Straight. Toward me. I blinked. And just before I could register what was happening, he took my hand gently, leaned in, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "Let's not keep them waiting, sweetheart." And then he smiled. Like he knew exactly what he was doing. For a split second, I forgot how to breathe. His hand was warm, confident, and steady in mine. My first instinct was to pull away. But something in his expression, a mixture of quiet reassurance and deliberate intention, made me pause. "Let's not keep them waiting, sweetheart," he repeated, softer this time, just for me. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. All I could do was follow as he gently guided me away from the bar, across the polished wood floor, and straight into the center of the wedding venue. The room had fallen mostly silent. Guests shifted in their chairs. Heads swiveled. Whispers buzzed at low volume. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother's wine glass tilt midair, frozen in shock. Kimberly's jaw quite literally dropped. Amanda, still glowing in bridal perfection, stood near the arch, blinking in confusion. We stopped just inside the main aisle. And then he turned to face me, as if this were completely normal. As if we were just fashionably late to a wedding we were meant to attend together. I finally found my voice. Who are you?" He leaned in, speaking just beneath the volume of the whispers surrounding us. "Play along. Just for a few minutes. I'll explain everything." I promise I stared into his face. Square jaw, piercing gray-blue eyes, not a trace of hesitation. He looked like someone who had never fumbled a decision in his life. And for reasons I still can't explain, I nodded. He led me to the second row, where a few seats had been marked as reserved. The usher didn't even question it. The man nodded politely, and we were seated. Silence still lingered in the air. And then, almost on cue, the music resumed. Amanda's entrance music. Canon in D, because of course, wafted from the quartet, and the ceremony continued. I barely registered the words exchanged at the altar. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. I turned slightly toward him, whispering through clenched teeth. "Are you some kind of wedding crasher?" A smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. "Technically, no, I was invited. I just didn't RSVP. "Do I know you?" "No," he said. "But I know you, Lisa." I froze. "What?" "I recognized you the moment I walked in. You gave a keynote at the New York Brand Strategy Summit last October. Emotional clarity and crisis communication. You crushed it." I blinked, stunned. "You were there?" "In the front row." Of course, that conference was the one thing I'd truly been proud of in the last 2 years. I'd spoken in front of 500 people. and I remembered a man in the front row. Thought he looked vaguely familiar, but in the moment, I chalked it up to nerves. And you just decided to walk into a wedding and pretend to be my date? I asked. He leaned in again. I heard your sister at the bar, the way she spoke about you. I don't like bullies, so I figured maybe today you could use someone in your corner. Before I could respond, the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride." And polite applause spread through the room. I clapped numbly, my thoughts still trying to catch up to what had just happened. This stranger, this very attractive, well-dressed stranger, had walked into a social battlefield and picked a side. Mine. As the ceremony ended and people began filing out toward the reception hall, I whispered, "Okay, I'm going to need more than a mysterious hero complex. Who are you, really?" He stood and offered his arm. Sebastian. Sebastian Cole. The name hit me like a freight train. "You're the Sebastian Cole?" "Depends who you ask," he said with a wink. I nearly tripped over my heels. Sebastian Cole, tech entrepreneur, billionaire founder of Cole Innovations, regular on Forbes' under 40 to watch list. That Sebastian Cole. I remembered seeing his face on a cover once while waiting at a newsstand. The article headline had said something about him being brilliant, elusive, and impossibly private. "And you just happened to be at my cousin's wedding?" He grinned. "Amanda's fiancé works for one of my subsidiaries. We had lunch last month, and he mentioned the wedding. When I heard the venue, I figured I might stop by and say a quick hello." "Why didn't you tell anyone you were coming?" He shrugged. "I don't do well with a lot of attention, or expectations, and I was going to leave, until I saw you." We were at the edge of the ballroom now. The doors to the reception area stood open, revealing candlelit tables, a champagne tower, and guests gathering in curious clusters. Sebastian looked down at me. "I can disappear right now if you want. Pretend none of this happened." I paused. The voices of judgment still echoed in my mind. My mother's sigh, Kimberly's smirk, Aunt Margie's commentary. Or I could walk in with Sebastian Cole. "Let's not keep them waiting," I said quietly, echoing his earlier words. His smile widened. And together, we stepped into the ballroom, arm in arm under the stunned gazes of everyone who'd ever written me off. The moment we stepped into the ballroom, you could feel the air shift, not in a cinematic way, with gasps and dramatic music, but in that real way, when people suddenly stop mid-sentence and try to pretend they weren't just talking about you. Everyone was staring. My family, Amanda's bridesmaids, even the staff behind the buffet. And Sebastian? He didn't flinch. He owned the moment like it was another boardroom meeting. Calm, composed, and completely unbothered by the sea of eyes now glued to us. The wedding planner blinked twice when she saw us. She recovered quickly, gesturing toward the seating chart. "Mr. Cole, we hadn't accounted for—" Sebastian gave her a polite nod. "Don't worry, Lisa and I will take care of it." He leaned toward me. "Do you know where they put you?" I bit the inside of my cheek. I was at table 19, the singles table, with cousin Donnie, my divorced great uncle, and a girl who's in high school. "Not ideal," he said dryly. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Amanda's father, Uncle Gerald, who was deep in conversation near the head table. Sebastian gave him a slight nod. Gerald's eyes widened, and he motioned quickly to the wedding planner. Within seconds, someone was pulling an extra chair to a half-empty table near the front. VIP territory. And just like that, I was moved. Social upgrade complete. Sebastian pulled my chair out for me. "After you, Ms. Bennett." I sat down slowly, still processing the absurdity of the moment. He took the seat beside me, adjusted his cufflinks, and leaned back like he belonged there. This man had turned a minefield of humiliation into a red carpet, and I hadn't even had a chance to understand why. "So," I said, turning slightly toward him, "let's go back to this whole play-along idea. How far are we taking this?" He considered that. "I figured we improvise, as long as you're comfortable." You do realize my entire family is going to interrogate you tonight? His lips curved. I've handled venture capital boards and congressional tech hearings. I think I can handle your Aunt Margie. I almost laughed, until I saw Kimberly approaching. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her gaze ping-ponged between me and Sebastian, like she was watching a tennis match she hadn't been invited to. Well, hello, stranger, she purred, clearly addressing him. You must be Lisa's guest? Sebastian stood politely and extended a hand. Sebastian Cole, pleasure to meet you. Kimberly's eyes flickered. Cole, that's a familiar name. He smiled. I get that a lot. She turned to me, expression faux casual. You never mentioned you were dating anyone, Lisa? I shrugged. We've been keeping it low-key. She tilted her head. How did you two meet? Sebastian didn't miss a beat. At the New York Brand Strategy Summit last fall, Lisa was a keynote speaker. Kimberly's eyebrows lifted. Oh? I was captivated, he said, locking eyes with me. Her approach to crisis communication was razor sharp. I introduced myself afterward and convinced her to grab a drink. Been trying to keep up with her ever since. My cheeks flushed. The worst part? It didn't feel like an act. Well, Kimberly said, voice tightening, I hope you have a strong backbone. Lisa's always been intense. Sebastian's smile sharpened just a little. I admire intensity. It's usually a sign of someone who knows what they want. I almost wanted to high-five him. Kimberly blinked, clearly not used to being outmaneuvered in casual conversation. I'm sure we'll talk more later, she said coolly before turning on her heel. When she was out of earshot, I exhaled slowly. You didn't have to do that. Do what? Defend me. Make it sound like I'm someone worth being proud of. He looked at me, and for the first time, his smile softened. I didn't make anything up, Lisa. Everything I said was true. The band started playing something jazzy in the background, and dinner began. Between bites of seared salmon and risotto, we fell into conversation. Real conversation. He asked about my job, how I'd built my freelance communications business after walking away from the PR agency world. I told him about clients who tried to underpay, media crises I'd diffused, and that moment I knew I'd made the right decision. Sitting alone on my floor at midnight, pizza in one hand, approval email in the other. And he listened. Really listened. He told me about his company, how Cole Innovations started in a college dorm room, how his father didn't speak to him for a year after he dropped out, how success came quickly, but peace took much longer. And just like that, the man in the suit became someone real, human, fallible. Halfway through dessert, Sebastian leaned in and said, By the way, you've got at least 4 people staring at you like they've just realized you're not invisible. I looked around. He wasn't wrong. Kimberly was watching. So was Aunt Margie. And my mom, who'd spent the last decade lamenting my dating life, was now whispering behind her napkin like I'd become royalty overnight. They're shocked, I said quietly. They're seeing a version of me they didn't think existed. Sebastian touched my hand lightly. Maybe it's time they met the real version. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to fit their comfort. I was finally expanding into my own story. Later that evening, after the cake had been cut and the first dances were over, the music shifted into something slow and sweeping. The lights dimmed to a golden glow, and couples began migrating to the dance floor like moths to warm light. Sebastian stood and extended his hand. Shall we? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because it had been years since I danced with someone who looked at me like I mattered. Still, I slid my hand into his and let him lead me to the floor. The band played something classic. Frank Sinatra, I think. But I barely registered the lyrics. All I could focus on was the feel of his hand at my waist, the way his other hand held mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. He wasn't flashy or showy. He just moved with quiet confidence. We found a rhythm almost immediately. A slow, easy back and forth that somehow felt like we'd done this before. You're surprisingly good at this, I said, breaking the silence. He chuckled. Mandatory lessons at boarding school. My mother believed every gentleman should know how to waltz and how to apologize properly. Did she teach you the latter too? She tried, he said, his smile faltering for the first time all evening. We danced in silence for a few more seconds. Then I asked, "Do you always do this?" "Do what?" "Rescue random women at weddings?" He looked down at me. "Only when they look like they're about to combust from emotional damage." I laughed despite myself. "That obvious?" He nodded, unashamed. "You walked in with your spine straight, chin up, pretending not to notice the dozens of eyes dissecting you. That takes guts." "It takes practice," I corrected. We kept moving. I felt a twinge in my chest, the kind of ache that comes when someone sees you more clearly than you're ready for. "I've spent most of my adult life trying to prove something to my family," I admitted. "That I'm not broken because I didn't get married by 28. That I'm not lesser because I chose career over kids. But no matter how much I achieve, I'm still poor Lisa in their eyes." Sebastian didn't respond right away. He just kept leading the dance, giving me time to breathe through the emotion behind my words. Then, softly, he said, "They're wrong, you know. Every word they've ever said about you that made you feel small, that's their fear talking, not truth." I looked up, surprised at the firmness in his voice. "You can always tell when people aren't comfortable with someone who knows who they are," he added. Before I could respond, someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was Amanda's new husband, Jason, I think. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Sorry to interrupt. Sebastian, can I borrow you for a second? Something with the payment system for the venue. We're locked out of the app and—" Sebastian gave me an apologetic glance. "Business emergencies follow me everywhere." He kissed my hand, a move that would have felt corny from anyone else, and turned to go with Jason. As I walked off the dance floor, I found myself face to face with my mother. She held a nearly empty glass of Chardonnay and a purse clutched tightly under one arm. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe. "Well," she said slowly, "that was quite the performance." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Sebastian Cole?" she said, tone skeptical. "I Googled him during dinner. Do you really expect us to believe you're dating one of the most private men in America? You've never mentioned him. Not once. Because I don't report my love life to the family gossip circle." Her eyebrows rose. "So he's real?" I folded my arms. "Yes, Mom, he's real." She sighed like I'd disappointed her by breathing. "Just be careful, Lisa. Men like that, they don't settle down with women like you." I felt the words like a slap. Women like me. She meant ordinary, real, flawed. "I think we're done with this conversation," I said, turning away before she could see the tears threatening to surface. I stepped out onto the patio for air. The night had cooled, the air crisp with the scent of autumn. A string of white lights twinkled above, and for a few blessed minutes, I was alone. Until Kimberly appeared beside me, arms crossed. "Well," she said, voice light but barbed. "Congratulations." I said nothing. "He seems very convincing," she continued. "You even had Aunt Margie believing it." I turned to face her. "Do you ever get tired of this? The snide comments, the constant digs. What exactly do you gain from making me feel small?" Kimberly rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't play the victim." "I'm not playing anything," I said quietly. "I'm just done shrinking so you can shine." For once, she didn't have a comeback. Sebastian reappeared then, walking onto the patio like a man who belonged everywhere. He slipped an arm around my waist and kissed the side of my head. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, and for the first time in years, I realized I meant it. We re-entered the ballroom just as the DJ invited everyone to the dance floor for what he called a moment of celebration for all the couples in the room. Sebastian kept his arm casually around me, his body warm against mine. We didn't dance this time. We just watched from the edge of the floor as couples twirled and laughed and leaned into each other like they'd known love all their lives. I watched them, feeling a complicated swirl of emotions, longing, admiration, and something dangerously close to envy. Sebastian leaned in. "What are you thinking?" "That this is the kind of night I usually spend alone," I admitted, "and that I don't know how to trust what's happening right now." He studied me for a moment. "It doesn't have to be anything more than what it is." "And what is it?" I asked. He paused. Two people who saw something in each other and decided not to ignore it. We were interrupted by Aunt Margie, who approached holding a flute of champagne and wearing her usual cloud of perfume. "Well, well, well," she said, with a tone that suggested she thought she'd caught us mid-scheme. "Lisa, you didn't tell us you were dating someone quite so accomplished." Sebastian turned on the charm. "I'm the lucky one, actually. Lisa's brilliance is what caught my eye first. I've been trying to keep up ever since." Aunt Margie's eyes narrowed, clearly thrown. "How long have you two been an item?" "About 3 months," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Really?" she asked, too brightly. Interesting that no one in the family had any idea, especially since Lisa always said she wanted to take her time before getting serious again. After Daniel, of course. I stiffened at the mention of his name. Sebastian's eyes flicked to me for a brief second, then back to Margie. "Some connections don't operate on timelines," he said gently. "They either work or they don't." "Well," Aunt Margie said, defeated but unwilling to show it, "we'll see how long this one lasts." As she floated away, I exhaled. She's been like that since I was 12. Sebastian looked at me carefully. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wasn't completely honest about how I knew you'd be here tonight." I froze. "What do you mean?" He handed me the paper. I opened it slowly, fingers trembling. It was a printed guest list, Amanda's, on official wedding letterhead. My name circled in red ink. "I didn't just show up by coincidence," he admitted. "Jason, Amanda's husband, works at one of my firms. We had lunch last week. He mentioned the wedding and your name came up. He mentioned you were coming alone." My stomach dropped. "So what? This was some kind of mission?" "No," he said quickly. "Not like that. When I heard your name, it rang a bell. I remembered the conference. I remembered how you spoke, how confident and sharp you were. I'd meant to reach out back then, but the timing never worked. When I realized you'd be here, I thought maybe I'd get a second chance." "A second chance to what?" I asked, voice low. "To introduce myself, to meet you without a stage between us." I folded the list. "And the dramatic entrance?" He smiled sheepishly. "Okay, I didn't plan that. I was going to leave, actually. I got cold feet. But then I saw your mom. I overheard what she said." He didn't need to repeat it. I knew the exact line. "Poor thing, she'll never find someone." "I saw your face, and I just walked in," he said. "It was impulsive and probably stupid, but not fake." I sat down on the edge of a chair, trying to process everything. "It's a lot, I know," he said. "But nothing I told you tonight was a lie. I didn't plan on pretending. I planned on asking you for coffee. Somehow it turned into this." "And what is this, Sebastian?" I asked, looking up at him. "Because it feels like I'm not sure what's real anymore." He crouched beside me. "This is real," he said. "At least for me. The way I've watched you hold yourself tonight, graceful, self-possessed, funny, you've handled a room full of judgment with more class than I've seen from board members twice your age." My heart thudded in my chest. Part of me wanted to believe him. The other part remembered how quickly affection could be manufactured. I'd been tricked before, loved by people who didn't mean it, believed in relationships that were built on control, not connection. Before I could respond, Kimberly appeared again, this time with that look on her face, the one that said she knew something I didn't. "Hey, Lisa," she said, all false sweetness. "You've got a moment? I think you should come see something." Sebastian stood. "We're kind of in the middle of something." "It'll only take a second," she interrupted. "Really, Lisa, you'll want to see this." I followed her reluctantly, heart pounding, gut sinking. She led me through the hallway toward the coat check area, then turned abruptly and faced me. "You're going to hate me," she said, pulling out her phone. "What is this?" She opened a tab on Safari, a news article. "Billionaire Sebastian Cole makes surprise appearance at private event, spotted with unidentified woman at family wedding." A photo, from tonight, of me and Sebastian at the bar. "What is this?" I whispered. Kimberly shrugged. "Guess you weren't as private as you thought." I looked at the timestamp. 20 minutes ago, someone had leaked it. My chest tightened. "Why are you showing me this?" Her expression turned sharp. "Because you should ask yourself something, Lisa. Was this about you, or about the story?" My mind reeled. Had I just been part of a well-orchestrated narrative? Or worse, a headline? I stood in that dim hallway, staring at the photo on Kimberly's phone. There I was, mid-laugh, a champagne glass in hand with Sebastian Cole's arm around my waist. And below it, "Billionaire makes surprise appearance at private NYC wedding. Unidentified woman may be a new mystery partner." And a few speculative headlines beneath that. My stomach turned. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked again, voice colder now. Kimberly tilted her head, her voice calm and saccharine. "Because you needed to know. You've been so wrapped up in your Cinderella moment, I thought you deserved to see what it looks like from the outside." "You think he did this?" I asked, breath catching. "That he staged this? For what? Attention?" Kimberly shrugged, but there was something gleaming in her eyes. "All I'm saying is, maybe ask yourself why someone like him would suddenly want to play your boyfriend at a wedding. In front of cameras. On the same weekend his new tech deal launches. Think about it." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. Back in the ballroom, the music was louder, the dancing more chaotic, but I could only see one face in the crowd. Sebastian. He was standing near the bar, scrolling through his phone. His brow furrowed, jaw tight. He'd seen it too. I walked straight up to him. "We need to talk. Now." He looked up, registering my expression instantly. "Lisa? Did you know this would happen?" "No," he said firmly. "Not like this. But you did know there was a chance someone might see us. Might post something." "Yes," he admitted. "But I didn't think it would happen so fast. And I didn't plan it. That photo? That leak? Not me." "Then who?" I asked. Because I've spent this entire night defending something I wasn't even sure was real. And now I find myself in a tabloid captioned as unidentified woman, like I'm part of some PR stunt. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. I could see it in his eyes. "But this doesn't work for me," I said quietly. "I can't be someone's moment. I've spent too many years being an afterthought, a stepping stone, or a placeholder. If this was a story for you, even a good one, I don't want it." Sebastian stepped forward. "Lisa, I didn't come here for publicity. I came here because I remembered a woman who stood on a stage and said things that made me rethink how I communicate with the world. Because when Jason mentioned your name, something clicked, and I thought, maybe that moment in October wasn't supposed to be the end of it." I swallowed, hard. "But you didn't give me a choice. You stepped into my life without asking. You walked in, hand outstretched, and I followed you, because I was desperate not to feel small." His voice softened. "You were never small." "I know that now," I said. "But I had to learn it the hard way." He nodded, stepping back. "If you ask me to leave, I will. But I hope you won't. I didn't fake what I felt tonight, Lisa. Not the way I looked at you. Not the way we danced. And definitely not the way I'll remember this moment. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. So he turned, slow and sure, and walked out of the ballroom. And just like that, the moment ended. I didn't cry. I didn't chase him. I just stood there, strangely calm, as if something inside me had finally clicked into place. I left an hour later, with no dramatic farewell, no goodbyes. Just a quiet walk out into the cool New York night. The air tasted like endings. And maybe, just maybe, new beginnings too. 3 weeks passed. No texts, no calls. I got back to work. Signed a new client. Reorganized my apartment. Went on a solo hike upstate and cried at the top of a trail for no particular reason other than knowing I could. Then one Thursday morning, a small package arrived at my office. No return address. Inside was a single object. A paperback book with a worn spine. Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. Tucked inside was a handwritten note. Because you did. S. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or cry. In the end, I did both. 2 months later, we crossed paths again. Not planned, not staged. I was speaking at another conference, this time in Chicago. Afterward, I was answering questions at the edge of the stage when I saw him in the crowd. No suit, no cameras, just jeans, a jacket, and that same look in his eyes. When the crowd dispersed, he walked up and said, "Coffee this time?" I nodded. No pretending. He smiled. No headlines. And this time, when I reached for his hand, it was on my terms. 6 months later, I brought him to another family wedding. But this time, no performance, no drama. Just us. 2 people who had learned to stop apologizing for who they were. And when my mother whispered, "You look happy," I simply said, "I am." Because I was. Not because of him, but because somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting to be chosen. And finally chose myself.